3 haunted encounters with the sinister unknown, revealed tales of unexplained terror. Sarah felt the weight of the world crash down around her as she stepped into the diner. The midnight air clung to her skin, whispering secrets she dared not listen to. The familiar smells of fries and burnt coffee filled her lungs, but something felt off. Something lurked just inside the shadows of the booths. As she wiped down the table, the clock struck 12, and an unsettling chill crawled down her spine. Hushed whispers echoed off the walls, like phantoms dancing in the corners of her mind. Her pulse quickened. The other diners, the ones who vanished like shadows when the shutters went down, were nowhere to be found. The fortune cookies sat untouched, their plastic wrapping promising luck that felt decades away. A shiver pieced through her as she turned toward the empty booth in the corner, a lingering sense that unseen eyes watched her. She shook it off. Fatigue must be settling in, she thought, as she wiped the counter with frantic movements, but dread has a way of tightening its grip. When Sarah finally returned home, the air turned still, too quiet for comfort. She opened the door to find her children's toys arranged meticulously in eerie patterns, blocks stacked high like little towers, stuffed animals watching her from their perches. Panic squeezed her chest as she stepped inside. Who had done this? Her heart raced, leaving her breathless. A neighbor? A simple prank? No, this felt different. Wrong. She tried to laugh it off, but anxiety clawed at her insides. She needed to protect her kids. The police had brushed her concerns aside too many times before. Just a bad breakup, Ma, they said, their voices dripping with indifference. But this wasn't about her past. This was about safety, her children's safety. And that sinister feeling crept back, warm and familiar, ready to pounce. Just then, a text chimed from her phone, vibrating against the countertop like a warning bell. It was Mr. Jensen, her friendly neighbor. "Let us play a little game, shall we?" Panic flooded her veins, freezing her in place. She glanced around, her hands shaking. Every creaking floorboard screamed at her to flee, every flickering light mocked her delusions of safety. Who could she trust in this seemingly friendly neighborhood, where whispers lived in the walls and darkness blurred the line between neighborly love and danger? The thought of Mr. Jensen, always so helpful, felt twisted, corrupted by a legacy of folklore that haunted Maplewood. Terror surged through her as she recalled snippets of conversation, a long-standing myth that crept through the whispers of the community, tales of ritualistic sacrifices beneath the mask of normalcy. One neighbor's false smile twisted into something far darker. As she paced, trembling hands reached for her phone again, but her heart sank. It had to be a sick joke, right? Her mind raced. Maybe they were just stories. Maybe he was just a lonely widower. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With each passing moment, dread pooled in her chest like dark water. Every gust of wind outside felt like eerie laughter, every creak of the house turning into a disembodied voice. How many times had she sacrificed her peace for this twisted facade of normalcy? The game had begun, and Sarah felt the rules closing in on her. Every shadow held a secret, every corner hid a monster. As she stood there, paralyzed by the unknown, her eyes were drawn toward the window. The night deepened, feeding the beast within. When safety fades, and fear whispers. Sweet nothings into the dark, where does one find refuge? The answer, she sensed, was lurking just beyond the glass. A gust of wind rattled the window, breaking Sarah's trance. Her heart raced as she flinched, glancing back at the darkness outside, searching for any sign of movement. Shadows flickered along the edges of her vision, like whispers trying to lure her into the abyss. With a pounding heart, she approached the window, each step dragging her deeper into a pool of anxiety. What was she doing? Peering into the night felt like inviting trouble. But the restless energy clawed at her, begging for answers. There, beneath a flickering street lamp, she spotted Mr. Jensen's figure. His smile was wide but too rigid, eyes glinting in the light like shards of glass. Was he waiting for her? Sarah's stomach twisted into knots as she pulled away, retreating into the safety of her home's dim light. Just a neighbor, she whispered to herself, yet her voice betrayed her, trembling with doubt. Something about his message twisted in her gut. A game? Sarah's mind raced through possibilities, each one darker than the last. The air thickened, oppressive, as she paced back into the living room. Flickers of thought sparked in her mind, strangled truths swirling around her like a suffocating mist. Suddenly, the lights flickered, plunging her into darkness before sputtering back to life. Was that just the power? Or was someone tampering with her security? Fussing nervously with the light bulbs, she snatched her phone to call for help but stopped mid-motion. Would the police really come this time? Would they ignore her pleas again, chalking it up to her imagination? A sound from the hallway. A creak. It seeded a fresh wave of terror, and Sarah froze, her breath hitching in her throat. A second noise, this one closer, like children giggling her kids. No, they should be asleep. She craned her neck toward the hall, the oppressive silence now filled with a sense of dread. Lily? Jake? She called out, her voice barely a whisper. The house answered with a chilling quiet. The hair on her arms stood on end. A moment of indecision clawed at her as the soft giggles echoed again, softer this time, leading her toward the bathroom down the hall. With shaky hands, she took a step forward, every creak of the floorboards amplifying the uneasiness swelling inside her. The bathroom door was ajar. A sliver of light cut through the darkness, teasing her, drawing her in. She pushed the door open slowly. The scene inside sank her stomach. Her children stood in front of the mirror, their faces blank as they traced lines on the glass, giggling softly as if sharing secrets only they could understand. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice breaking through the fear that wrapped around her like a shroud. But they didn't respond, just kept giggling, fingers dancing on the mirror as if drawing unseen patterns that made Sarah's blood freeze. Instinct kicked in. Get away from there. Now. She moved toward them, but as she did, a shadow flickered behind her in the hallway like a serpent ready to strike. She turned, breath shorter, heart hammering against her ribcage, and there stood Mr. Jensen, his smile stretched unnaturally across his face, as if it had been carved into him. "Sarah," he whispered, voice low and melodic, "isn't it time you joined the game?" She felt the walls closing in, a scream trapped in her throat. How had he come in without her noticing? She reached for the kids, but chills gripped her heart as the air itself thickened, suffocating her hopes of escape. This was no ordinary game. Her hand trembled over the door's edge, but how could she protect them when a player had already entered the game? Before she could move, she heard her kids murmur, "Mommy. It's our turn." Something was terribly wrong. Every beating second brought her closer to an unfathomable horror. What truth lay in the twisted rituals whispered through Maplewood? And more importantly, how far was she willing to go to save her children from the sinister unknown? As the clock ticked ominously, Sarah knew it wouldn't be long before she had no choice but to discover what awaited her beyond the surface. She just hoped she could shield her kids from the game before it was too late. The world seemed to tilt dangerously on its axis. Sarah stood frozen, her heart thundering in her ears. The sight of her children laughter spilling from their lips, yet their eyes gazing at the mirror as if possessed sent icy fingers straight through her veins. She felt a sudden emptiness where her fear had resided, replaced by a desperate urgency to reclaim her babies. "Stop it. Come here," she shouted, ignoring the way her voice cracked. They didn't flinch. What was happening? The air felt thick, nearly electric, and a sinister warmth seeped into the room from some unknown source. Shadows twisted and turned, whispering against her skin, sending shivers down her spine. Mr. Jensen advanced slowly, the smile on his face unnaturally wide, as if he enjoyed her rising panic. "Time to play," Sarah," he insisted, his words wrapping around her like a thick blanket. She lunged for her kids, but as their hands reached the mirage on the glass, the reflections distorted into wretched faces dark, haunting, flickering with malicious delight. It felt like a trap, and instinct screamed at her to act. Suddenly, a chilling breeze swept through the bathroom, snuffing out the remnants of light. The fluorescent bulb flickered and buzzed, casting harsh shadows that danced with the menacing laughter of her children. "Lily! Jake!" She cried again, her voice cracking, frantic. Mr. Jensen's laughter joined theirs, deep and guttural. "They want to join us. Don't you understand? They already are." In the dim light, she could see their faces, now twisted and grim, joy replaced by a hollow stare, each moment a step closer to capture. The walls seemed to breathe around her, pulse with dark energy that drummed in rhythm with her fevered heartbeat. Terror surged through her as the games they had spent countless nights playing began to swirl in nightmarish forms. The drawing, the laughter, were they really just innocent childhood games? Or had something else taken root, something that thrived in shadows and despair? Adrenaline exploded in her chest, propelling her forward. She seized Lily's shoulder, but the child merely stared through her, eyes glazed as if seeing something only the damned could envision. "Mommy, it's fun," and that S when Sarah felt its stark, cloying dread. The sensation of 100 eyes boring into her, just outside the door, just beyond her field of vision, pressing against her mind, filling her with despair. The air grew heavier, thickened with malignant intent, clutching at her throat like a vice. "No. You're my babies. You have to come with me," she wailed, casting a glance backward, trying to break the spell that bound them to their own reflections. Gritting her teeth, Sarah swept the child into her arms, her instincts roaring for survival, but Jake remained, locked in the dance, with one last hurried glance at Mr. Jensen, who only nodded, eyes gleaming with dark glee. She felt loud cracks beneath her feet. The floorboards creaked ominously, walls warping, darkness creeping in. She had to drag Jake back to reality, she had to do it fast. Biting back fear, she lunged past the mirror, inching toward him. "Please, I'm begging you." But as she grabbed Jake, his laughter morphed into a chilling echo that seemed not to belong to him. Sarah's heart fell to her stomach, his voice was right, and just like that, the room plunged into darkness. Lights shrieked, got cut, leaving her utterly blind. "Mommy?" The echoing voice was gone. Desperate breaths filtered through the suffocating blackness. The only sound was the frantic pounding of her heart. In that moment, it hit her that night wasn't about avoiding the game. It was about understanding its rules. They could be victims or they could be players. But could she ever win back her children? As she turned around, preparing to face whatever lurked in the shadows, a crisp whisper slithered through the dark, "Sarah, there's no way out." Panicking, she realized she had stepped into the abyss. What horrors awaited her in that accursed game? And who would remain when the final player made their choice? Sarah's pulse thundered in her ears, drowning out every whisper of the abyss. The darkness felt alive, pressing against her skin like 1,000 icy fingers. She grasped Jake tighter, the weight of his small body grounding her momentarily. Panic rose, a poison filling her lungs as she realized she was alone in the void. "Jake?" she called, her voice a fragile thing swallowed by the heavy silence. "Please, respond." But deep down, she feared hearing nothing in return. A gust of breath swept across her face, chilling yet oddly enticing. It carried whispers soft, almost inviting. "Join us, Sarah, it's fun." The voice, sweet yet tainted, slithered through her mind like a serpent. She stumbled backward, her shoes slipping against the cold tile floor. Dread washed over her, pooling in her stomach. They weren't just playing games, they were leaving this world, slipping into something darker, something beyond her reach. "Lily. Jake. Please." Her voice broke, desperation cracking through her armor of strength. She couldn't let them lose themselves. She could still turn this around, but as she clutched at the darkness, it felt as if the walls were closing in, tightening like a noose around her neck. That eye and that suffocating blackness, she caught a faint spark, a glint of light reflecting off the mirror. It pulsed, beckoning. Her heart raced. The reflections inside twisted and contorted, each face a grotesque mask of longing and laughter. They were waiting for her, but she couldn't trust them. She had to remember the rules. To win, she had to understand. With renewed determination, she pressed forward. The shadows flickered, and for a brief moment, she could see their faces. Lily smiled, but it was not her daughter's smile, it was twisted, cruel. Jake's laughter echoed again, haunting as if mocking her futile attempts. In that moment, she felt them slipping further away. "Stop! Stop! You know I love you!" she shouted, her voice desperate and raw. "Come back to me!" But the laughter swelled, enveloping her, and Mr. Jensen's presence loomed closer in the darkness. "They are happy, Sarah. Isn't that what you wanted for them?" His voice slithered through her defenses, a noxious fog that wrapped around her brain. No. She had to break free. With every ounce of strength she had left, Sarah lunged toward the mirror. The loud fissure of shattering glass erupted around her like thunderclaps, pulling her in. In the chaos, she could feel the jagged edges clawing at her skin that burned like fire. "Mommy!" A small voice cut through the din, desperate yet distant. It was Jake. She had to reach him. With a cry, she dove into the shards, the world around her exploding in a kaleidoscope of colors and screams. For a fleeting second, she saw their faces. They were merging, blending into something dark and voracious. "Help us!" the chorus of children moaned, and she felt the pull of despair clutching at her heart. Then, there was only darkness. The silence was deafening, broken only by a soft, wet dripping sound. Sarah blinked, her eyes straining against the void. "Jake? Lily?" The faintest glow appeared, illuminating cold stone walls around her. She was somewhere else deep in the darkness. A distant, eerie song echoed off the walls, a lullaby that twisted and coiled, inviting yet sinister. She took a cautious step forward, the ground slick beneath her foot. It felt wrong. A realization struck her, she wasn't just inside the game. She had become part of it, entwined in its horrific tapestry. The whisper returned, wrapping around her like a serpent. "We're waiting, Sarah," she shuddered, her breath hitching in her throat. How many had come before her? She was running out of time, out of chances. But did she dare play again? "Join us!" Her heart raced, uncertainty clawing at her spine. What awaited her on the other side of that inviting voice? Would she find her children or something far worse? The walls pulsed around her, alive with whispers that coiled in her ears like smoke. Sarah's breath became shallow, desperation clawing at her chest. She moved deeper into the chilling space, the glow from the distant light strobing in unsettling patterns. The eerie lullaby twisted in her mind, twisting memories she'd rather forget. "Jake! Lily!" She shouted again, the emptiness echoing back as if mocking her. It was becoming harder to think, harder to focus. The cold seeped into her bones, weighing her down like an anchor. Suddenly, the whispering grew louder. "Join us, it's fun." The words wrapped around her head like chains, heavy, suffocating. It felt almost familiar, a blend of childlike trust altered into something sinister. Instinct screamed at her to flee, yet she felt an undeniable tug toward the glow. The ground squelched beneath her, slick and unforgiving. Whatever lay in this place was not meant for the living. Every step she took sent ripples of dread through her. Shadows danced at the edge of her vision, phantoms of her kids lost in the depths of night. She had to find them. As she pressed on, the sound of dripping water morphed into laughter. But it wasn't the innocent laughter of her children, it was a strange cacophony, filled with malice and nostalgia that wormed its way into her brain. Sarah, the sweet but tainted voice pulled her, promising joy. "We're waiting. Don't you want to play?" She shook her head, fighting the weight of their call. Their happiness, it seemed, carried a cost. But what was left if she turned away? Then, through the twisted fog, she spotted something, a ragged toy, Jake's favorite. The bear's eye was missing, and its fur was knotted and dirty, but it radiated a warmth that drew her in. She reached for it, desperation guiding her hand. As her fingers brushed the cloth, a surge of memories flooded back, laughter at the park, bedtime stories, and sweet kisses. Those precious images felt like sunlight piercing through the dark, but just as quickly, a shadow crept in her children's faces, twisted in pain, mouths open in silent screams. "Join us," they wailed again, only now it wasn't just a voice fading into the darkness, it was in her mind, pulling her toward a choice. "Please, no." She backed away, shivering at the thought of what they had become. They were here, yet not. She felt like a puppet in a game she didn't understand. "Mommy." The voice burst in crystal clarity, a cry filled with panic and hopelessness. That single plea sliced through the fabric of despair with sharp resolve. It was Jake. She couldn't let them down. Not now. The walls began to shift and distort, the song turning frantic, echoing her inner turmoil. Shadows lunged, dancing playfully, then turning predatory. Sarah felt the world close in on her, a living prison of despair. "Fight it, Sarah. You know who you are." She yelled at herself, her own voice cutting through the screams around her. The weight of their darkness pressed down, a heavy tide threatening to drag her under. "Join us." The whispers grew in intensity, and this time, they came with a vision, images of a family united in glee, her children laughing, joy shining in their eyes, but beneath it, a darkness writhed, hungry and waiting. She pressed her palms against her temples, trying to drown out the seductive lure, dripping in promises of happiness. But was it true happiness? Or something far more dreadful? A sudden, deafening crash echoed, causing the ground to tremble. The walls splintered, revealing a flicker of light beyond. Hope bloomed, instantaneous and bright, but fear nipped at her heels. Could she trust it? With a surge of dread-fueled adrenaline, she sprinted toward the light. But just as she reached out, the shadows surged forward, claws extending, ready to reclaim their prize. "Don't leave us!" they screamed, voices uniting in a haunting melody that coursed through her veins with icy fingers. Sarah faltered, heart pounding, knowing she had a decision to make. She could feel their presence lurking. What darkness had taken her children? And could she ever bring them back from it? Would she stand her ground or succumb to the abyss that sought to claim her soul? The light flickered once more. Was it a way out or another trap? The choice loomed before her, a path laid with uncertainty and fear, and time was running out. The light pulsed, a heartbeat against the crushing shadows. Sarah hesitated, every instinct screaming at her to run. But then she heard it again. "Mommy." Jake's voice sliced through the chaos, aching and raw, like a knife into the dark. It was enough to propel her forward, towards the flickering promise. The ground bucked beneath her, the walls vibrating as if protesting her existence. With each step, the shadows screamed louder, their twisted forms clawing at the edges of her sanity. "Join us." They surged, hungry for her despair, but she pressed on, eyes glued to the glow that shimmered like a distant star. As she drew closer, the light revealed a doorway, a gaping maw of possible salvation. But beyond it lay something else. Something she couldn't quite grasp. Flickering images danced within, from moments of her children's lives and from something darker, twisted remnants of the laughter that used to thrum with joy. Suddenly, with a deafening crash, the ground heaved. An unseen force tried to pull her back, dragging at her feet, the adhesive weight of sorrow and longing threatening to snatch her away. She stumbled but regained her balance, determined not to be consumed. "I want to let you take me," she cried out, fear clenching around her heart like icy fingers. The shadows shuddered, momentarily stilling at her words. "You think you can escape?" One hissed, a voice oozing malice and mockery, guttural and ancient. Sarah's heart raced. The walls shimmered, revealing indecipherable faces, each contorted into grief and rage. The ground beneath her quaked again, an unsettling cadence reminding her that time was not on her side. Her resolve solidified. With one last glance at the shadowy forms creeping closer, she plunged through the doorway. The world spun. Light enveloped her, so blinding that it felt like she was being reborn. She gasped, air filling her lungs sweet and sharp. But as her eyes adjusted, a new terror settled in her gut. She stood in a familiar room, her old living room filled with pastel colors and sunlight filtering through the curtains. But something was off. The air felt stale, and shadows flickered at the corners, whispering her name in sweet, taunting tones. "Mommy, come and play." They sounded like her children, but it was all wrong. "Jake? Lily?" she called, dread filling her voice. There was no response, just echoes of her own. Panic surged as she stepped further in. The room looked as if it had been frozen in time, thought to hold comfort but instead radiated sorrow. Family photos lined the walls, faces smiling but the eyes they were empty, glazed over with a sheen of foreboding. Something shifted behind her. She turned abruptly, the warmth of the room growing cold. A figure stood just out of the light, tall and gaunt, its features distorted, a ripple of darkness that threatened to spill out and drown her in its tide. "Welcome home," it whispered, voice dripping with sinister glee. Sarah stumbled back, heart hammering wildly against her chest. "What do you want?" she demanded, anger flaring in the face of despair. The figure took a slow step closer, one long finger pointing, a grin spreading across its elongated face. Everything the realization clawed at her. Whatever this thing was, it was tied to the darkness she fled. It wasn't just seeking her, it wanted her children, their joy. "No," she breathed, knowing there would be no peace until she broke this cycle, but before she could speak, the shadows erupted, swirling wildly around the figure. "You can't stop it," they shouted, their voices rising to a fever pitch. "What have you done to them?" she screamed, each word gripped in raw emotion, desperate for answers. The figure laughed, a sound that chilled her blood. "Isn't it beautiful?" it crooned, and the walls vibrated with echoes of laughter that were not her children's. Sarah clenched her fists, resolve hardening. She would face this nightmare. No more running. But as she prepared to charge toward the figure, the floor shifted again, a dark rift yawning beneath her. "Join us," echoed around her, seductive and all-consuming, fueled by promises of family and bliss mingled with despair. Would she fall into the darkness, joining the ghosts of her past? Or could she fight back and save her children from whatever horror had taken root in this twisted world? The answer tugged at her heart, yet the ground beneath her crumbled, pulling her toward an unimaginable void. One last chance remained. Would she leap into the chasm or find a way to tear them from the jaws of darkness? Time was running out. The darkness below her opened wide, an insatiable void that promised to swallow her whole. Sarah hesitated, her heart pounding like a war drum. The laughter around her crescendoed, mocking, jeering. "Join us aloft," it twisted into a wailing chorus that clawed at her sanity. A flurry of memories overtook her. Jake's laughter on sunny days, Lily's sweet innocent giggle while playing in the garden. But these whispers weren't theirs. They felt wrong, twisted by the darkness she had just entered. She couldn't let this thing take them too. Enough. Sarah screamed as she stumbled backward, palm pressing against the wall in front of her. It was cold, clammy under her touch. She glanced at the figure, its shape wriggling like smoke. Its grinning mouth moved, but the words came from the shadows around her. "You think you can resist?" Desperation fueled her thoughts. If she could just find a way to counter this evil, to confront the darkness, she might save her children. Gathering her courage, she turned to the figure now lurking at her shoulder, its breath a chill upon her neck. "Get away from me." In that moment of fierce clarity, dim light flickered against the walls, creating swirling shapes, faces, features twisted with agony and rage. They begged silently, tears of darkness streaming from hollowed eyes. "Help us," but what help could she offer? They were lost in despair, forever trapped. And then, like a gunshot, silence erupted throughout the room. The shadows recoiled, scrambling back into the corners, leaving behind a suffocating vacuum. Sarah tried to catch her breath, dread filled her with each heartbeat. "What the hell is this place?" she muttered, feeling the air thicken. "Your home," the figure replied with a twisted smile, its voice low and throaty. "Your sanctuary turned graveyard." The layers of horror folded in upon her. The shadows drew closer again, while fragments of laughter slipped into the air like shards of glass. Sarah clenched her fists, focusing on the surfaces of her children's laughter, using it against the darkness that threatened to engulf her. "No!" she shouted. "I will not succumb." The moment she spoke, the room shook violently. The floor trembled beneath her, fissures forming like open wounds, gaping and raw. Chaos erupted when the ceiling dropped low, shadows creeping toward her, trying to consume her whole. "Join us!" The chorus became a thunderous roar, accompanied by a sickening snapping and grinding, but Sarah felt something shift inside her, a warmth spreading against the cold. It was the thought of her children, the fight to protect them giving her strength. She wasn't here to give in, she was here to fight. "Get back!" She surged forward, determination coursing through her veins. The shadows shrieked, recoiling from her ferocity. She could feel their cold tendrils brush against her skin, but she wouldn't let fear take her. She pushed harder into the abyss, the cracks in the floor widened under her feet, shadows spilling over into the lighted walls. "Stop!" screamed the figure, anger dripping from every word. But it was too late. Something strange began to occur within the room. Light spilled from her hands, bright and blinding. It pulsed against the encroaching demons, and they writhed as if in agony. One by one, they began to dissipate, screaming as they vanished into the ether. For the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. Yet that feeling was abruptly snuffed out when a guttural roar erupted from the figure. "You can't escape!" it howled. The walls shook violently, and the ground began to split more dramatically. "We'll see about that," she whispered defiantly, edging toward the doorway she'd seen through the chaos earlier. But she couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The shadows weren't done with her. With one last glance behind her, Sarah lunged toward the light, trusting her instinct. What if it led her to her children? Or worse, what if it led her deeper into the darkness? Time was running thin again, and the weight of future choices fell heavily on her shoulders. What awaited her on the other side? Would her bravery be a beacon of hope or a pathway to despair? The blinding light enveloped her as she launched forward, pulling Sarah from the grasp of darkness. For a moment, the oppressive weight lifted, and she could breathe again. But clarity vanished the instant she landed hard on a cold, hard floor. She scrambled back to her feet, heart racing, frantically scanning for the doorway that had promised escape. Instead, she found herself in a dim corridor, flickering fluorescent lights hanging above like a sickly glow in an abandoned hospital. The walls were painted a sterile white, but grime smeared across the surface hinted at decay. The faint rustling echoed in the stale air, a reminder that she was not alone. The shadows lingered, blending into the corners, watching with hidden eyes. "Jake! Lily!" Sarah shouted, desperation clawing at her throat. No response, panic bubbled within her. Each step forward felt weighted with dread. The laughter of the darkness echoed in her mind, twisting into horrid taunts. Join us!" Determined to find her children, Sarah moved deeper into the corridor, each footfall echoing ominously against the cold linoleum. Suddenly, a door creaked open at the far end. The air shifted, charged with something primal, pulling her closer. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting shadows that danced like phantoms. She felt it in her marrow, an invitation, or perhaps a trap. "Don't go in there," a soft voice hissed from behind her. Sarah whirled around, eyes wide. A young girl stood in the shadowy corridor, her hair dark and knotted, eyes hollow yet pleading. "It's bad. It's a mistake," she urged, voice trembling. Who are you? Sarah asked, her voice tight with restraint. Where are my children? Lost. All of us lost. The girl's gaze drifted to the door. No one returns from the other side. It's a grave. The words sat heavy in the air. I have to find them, Sarah asserted, wrestling with her resolve. She could not leave the children behind. The thought ignited the fire within her. The girl's expression shifted to despair. They'll take you, too. You won't survive. Let me help you. Help us both. Please. But the girl only shook her head. It's too late for me. I was like you, once. But they know your fears. They'll twist them. What do you mean? Sarah pressed, her heart racing faster with confusion and fear. Your past, your regrets, they will show you. You mustn't go. But desperation drowned out caution. Sarah glanced back at the door. Could her children really be on the other side? Or was it another trap set by the malevolent force that hunted them? Ignoring the chilling warning, Sarah turned toward the door. With a deep breath, she reached for the handle. It felt warm as her fingers curled around it. The world outside buzzed with even more urgency. Yet just as she was about to pull it open, a cacophony erupted. The walls trembled, whispers growing into a deafening roar. Join us. They clamored, seemingly from every direction, pulling at her sanity. The girl cried out, clasping her hands over her ears. Don't listen. Just run. But Sarah's body lost control. The door swung open, dragging her into darkness. The instant she crossed the threshold, reality twisted again, plunging her into a tempest of memories. Images blurred fiercely: Jake's tear-streaked face, Lily dragging her favorite blanket across the floor, their laughter turning to screams, fear congealed in her throat. No! She screamed, trying to fight against the onslaught of memories, against the very essence of her being tearing apart. The girl's terrified face loomed momentarily in the doorway, eyes wide. Get out! She disappeared as shadows engulfed Sarah's vision like a tidal wave. Would she witness the greatest terror of all, the loss of who she loved? As the darkness closed in, Sarah felt herself being pulled apart by the remnants of her own fear. Was there truly salvation, or had she sealed her fate? The walls of her soul echoed with the timeless question, would she ever return from the depths of darkness, or become just another wandering shadow trapped by her own despair? The darkness swallowed her whole, and Sarah's world unraveled. All at once, she was racing through the corridors of her mind and body. Flashes of flickering images poured in: her children giggling, a shattered vase, a white-knuckled grip on a steering wheel during a terrible storm. Each moment flooded back with relentless force, threatening to consume her. Jake! Lily! Panic surged again, clawing up from her stomach, causing her to sob. But the comforting echoes of the past twisted into jagged shards, fragmented screams, a voice calling, Mommy. That fractured her heart. Then silence, that heavy silence clawed at her, and as if in response, a mirage of her children chased to the forefront of her vision. They stood together in a sun-drenched meadow, faces aglow, laughter ringing with the purity of innocence. But it quickly darkened, the scene shifting to a bluish, oily fog rolling in. They reached out to her, but just as she stepped forward, their faces morphed into hollow visages, pale and lost, and the meadow twisted into a bleak wasteland. No! This isn't real! Sarah shouted, flinging her arms out as if she could swat the vision away. The warm sun turned searing, and the ground beneath her warped. Sarah, help us! The cries, deeper, more chilling, echoed from behind her, reverberating against the oppressive walls. She felt a tugging sensation around her waist, like claws raking through her skin, a reminder of the great void that surrounded her. Then the corridor morphed, expanding and contracting, as though it were a living thing. Shadows lengthened and whispered. They seeped into her consciousness, wrapping their fingers around her memories, squeezing tighter and tighter until she gasped for air. You can't escape, they hissed, voices overlapping, blending into a cacophony. You belong to us now. The corridor flickered, and suddenly, settings shifted again. She crouched in the back seat of a car, rain drumming against the windows, suffocating them in amber light. A sharp turn. Screams. No. Her breath quickened, she could feel the hot seat against her. The crash. The cries of her children. It was happening all over again. Her heart tore at the thought of the accident, the last glimpse of life and warmth slipping away. Would she be forced to relive this torment for eternity? Get out, get out. With every frantic thought, she surged forward through the miasma of memory, battling against the chains that pulled her back into her darkest moments. She could feel them tightening around her neck, squeezing the air out until she shed violent tears. Yet still, she pushed through. Only forward. A fragment of clarity broke through the haze, echoing like a desperate mantra. Just then, a pulse of light flickered at the end of the corridor, illuminating a silhouette that seemed to beckon her closer. There was a flicker of hope. What if they needed her? What if it connected her to Jake and Lily? Trust the light, Sarah. A voice whispered, familiar and comforting. She sprinted toward it, breath coming faster, adrenaline surging. But suddenly, the shadowy figures morphed again, stretching their arms to block her. Stay with us. They shrieked, the air thickening, pulling her into the vortex of the past that a deafening roar filled her ears as she felt herself teetering on a precipice, between the light and the void. Just then, she glimpsed the terror in the faces of her children through the shadows, desperately reaching for her. Help. With her heart pounding like a drum, she knew she had to choose. The light dimmed, flickered again, threatening to go out. Was this the end or a new beginning? And then, as Sarah took a desperate breath, she wondered, if she stepped back, would she lose them forever? The darkness surged, whispering the fate of those who chose unwisely. Instinct took hold, but would it guide her to salvation or cascade her onward into even darker depths? Sarah stood on the precipice, the light flickering behind her like a dying star. The shadows hissed and drawled, promising warmth but offering only despair. The air thickened, wrapping around her like a vice, squeezing the breath from her lungs. Her heart hammered in her chest, every pulse a reminder of what was at stake: her children. Mommy. The haunting call echoed through the shadows, the sharpness of it sliced right through her resolve. It felt like ice at the tips of her fingers, and for the first time since this nightmare began, doubt seeped into her mind: could she choose the light? Or would she drown beneath the weight of her own fears, forever trapped in the darkness that preyed on her past? Trust the light, Sarah. The familiar voice rang out again, her mother's. The warmth of her childhood washed over her, pushing her to choose. With a fierce resolve, she leaped toward the light, abandoning the siren song of shadows. Everything around her shattered, broken and beautiful as she felt herself hurtling through the air. The light enveloped her, but it wasn't blinding, it was a comfort, like wrapping up in a warm blanket on a cold night. It filled her senses, keeping the deeper darkness at bay. With a burst of strength, she soared into the brightness, her arms stretched out, fingers reaching for something, someone. She landed softly, the impact a gentle thud beneath her feet. Blinking against the light, she recognized the room. Her living room. The air was fuller, richer, with the smell of cookies baking and laughter floating like music through the halls. The fluttering presence of hope enveloped her, yet the thought of the shadows left traces of fear trickling through her soul. Jake. Lily. She called out, her voice breaking. Suddenly, a whirl of movement caught her eye. Her children raced around the corner, their faces flushed with laughter and joy as they sprinted toward her. Shining, unaffected by darkness, like sunlight breaking through a stormy sky. When they collided, she sank to her knees, hugging them tight, and their warmth ignited a flame of relief that ignited every corner of her heart. Mommy. Mommy. They squealed, the sound like a beautiful symphony that eased her racing heart. Tears spilled from Sarah's eyes. Oh, my babies! The weight of pain dissipated, but the shadows lingered just beyond her peripherals, gnashing their teeth, yet amidst the laughter, the door creaked open, and Mr. Jensen appeared, stepping into the light with an unsettling grin plastered across his face. His eyes held glimmers of the darkness, casting shadows that curled around him like mist. "Sarah, my dear," he crooned, stepping closer, "you can't escape. Come play." Fear coursed through her. She squeezed her kids tighter, instinct driving the desperation. "No. We're done playing games." Mr. Jensen's wide smile twisted, losing warmth, becoming cruel. "Ah, but the game needs players." The light morphing around them flickered as his words slithered into their hearts. Energy crackled, charged with the undying essence of both love and fear. The protective barrier wavered. "Get away from my kids!" Sarah shouted, propelled by a surge of maternal ferocity. Suddenly, a whirlwind of voices erupted from behind Mr. Jensen, the whispers of those trapped in the game, pleading for freedom. Sarah felt a rush of power swelling in her chest, the defense of love rising up. Their cries were invigorated by determination as she faced him head-on. "No. You don't have power over me anymore. You can't take my children," she screamed, letting the rage fuel her will. The shadows quaked, shrieking around them, rattled by the force of her conviction. The air trembled, light shining brilliantly around her like a halo. In that moment, she could see the essence of those lost figments of spirit, fading into despair. "Fight!" they cried, an echoing mantra, and she did. She drew energy from her love for Jake and Lily, battling the encroaching darkness that hungered for her soul. The shadows screeched, recoiling from the radiant burst of warmth that radiated from her, shimmering like a protective shield encasing her family. "Let them go." Her voice thundered across the dim confines, shaking foundations and filtering through the malevolent echoes. The ground trembled beneath her. Their laughter rang through the air like chimes of freedom. Their eyes filled with innocence, she pulled her children close and twisted away from the shadowed figure. The light surged, filling every corner, slicing through their fears, enveloping them like a long-lost embrace, forcing the darkness back. "Goodbye," she shouted to the figure. "You'll never have them." With an explosive brightness, the light surged forward, shattering the lingering shadow, scattering the darkness into oblivion. And just like that, the laughter burst open, filled with joy, exploding into a million glimmering fragments. Sarah gasped, her heart hammering with unabashed love, feeling every embrace of light return to her. The fear washed away, leaving her refreshed and hopeful. "Mommy! Let us play!" Her children called, pulling her into their sorrows and delights, those innocent games she vowed never to take for granted again. Outside, the sun broke brightly through the curtains, illuminating the home that had once been a battleground of darkness. But now it stood as a beacon of love, free of fear. Reunited and resolute, they found sanctuary in each other, knowing that sometimes, even when shadows seem overpowering, the light of love can pierce through, and amid the echoes of their heartbeats, she realized this was their victory. As they laughed together, Sarah knew it was time to share their story, time to warn others against the shadows. She had chosen the light, and she would help others do the same. So remember, if you've enjoyed this wild ride, if you felt the suspense and urgency, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support so you don't miss the exclusive stories coming up. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Let's keep our community alive and thriving. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about what just happened. Your thoughts deserve to be heard, and for goodness sake, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to spread the word. Only true fans understand the importance of that. With each heartbeat,